here's something that I needed to learn the hard way. If you're not ready to receive what you're working for, then it's not gonna happen. See, the first 2 years of my business, I went from $150 a month to $500 a month. 2 full years of hard work, right? Putting in all the effort, but still needing a second job to get by, to just sustain my business. The 2 years that came after that, something changed. I went from $500 a month to $16,000 in July, which was a new high. And you would think that this is just strategy, right? Experience and skill. And sure, they play a role, but a big realization happened in between those 2 phases. And it was this. Getting something that you haven't gotten before is a negotiation between your past self and your future self. And whoever is the strongest will decide what you get. If the future self wins, you get something you've not gotten before. But if your past self wins, you will get what you've been getting. When you are identified more with your past self, right? Thinking, feeling, acting, then your efforts get absorbed in this void of limiting beliefs. You default to these familiar, comfortable patterns and self-sabotage without you even knowing it. I needed to solve this, and it was so frustrating because everything you'll find about mindset, it's also floaty and voodoo, right? It wasn't practical and grounded enough for me to do anything with it. But eventually I stumbled upon something that was practical enough for me. And so here's the no bullshit way of how I went from achieving jack shit in 2 years to changing my whole life in the 2 years that came after that. It is 2 techniques that I've never stopped developing or teaching my clients. The first one is powerful, but the second one still feels illegal to me. The first point that no man can skip is to expand the future self. Because naturally there's 2 things going on here. There's the future self that isn't strong enough, and there's the past self that is currently dominating your thoughts, your feelings, and therefore your behavior. So the first step is, of course, to expand this future self. And like Eckhart Tolle and Bob Proctor continue repeating, the more vivid the image of that future self, the more it starts to live on its own. Which in practical terms means if you know precisely what that future self looks like, and you then spend more time identifying as that future self, it will overshadow that old limiting self within you. This is a simple result of the things that you want, the desires you have, no longer being intimidating. Why? Because the future self that you identify with already has it. Your past self is the only part within you that is intimidated by all these big desires you have, all these new things you want to create. So what we need to do is very simple. Step 1 is to create the image, which means who is he, that future self? What does he do and what does he have? And very simply, once you've got that and that image is vivid enough for you to see it, right? Then simply review it every morning before you do a single thing. Before you take action, you say to yourself, this is the frame, this is the perspective from which I behave. This is what I like to call practical manifestation. And I made a whole video on this. If you want to see the video after this one, I'll tag it on the screen. And really, and I want to have said this maybe more so to my younger self, is that this isn't magic, man. This is a simple process of deciding what your frame is in the world and therefore slowly expecting certain things to happen rather than to be intimidated by them. Then secondly, now that you have an image of that future self and you're repeating that to yourself every day, it's expanding, right? And we still have that pesky old self, right? Afraid, doubtful, sometimes insecure or even feeling inferior, right? Every effort you make to create something new gets met with this limiting belief. And that's the hard part, we think, right? Because it's so abstract, and what is a limiting belief even, and do I need to go back to my childhood and all that shit? No, you don't. Here's the only thing that solved it for me. Point 2. Become stupidly ignorant to your past self. Let me explain. The power of your past self comes only from the negotiation itself. It is the response. It is engaging in a conversation with the self in any form, right? To fight it, escape it, or agree with it, that keeps the spirit alive. To respond is to acknowledge its existence. To respond is to say, I still agree with you. So let's say you've done step 1, and one of the things you have in 3 months, for example, is 100,000 views on a single video. You will now go about your day, you're in the gym, and you get these thoughts, right? Let's say the thought says, there's no way that I will have 100,000 views on a single video. Why would 100,000 people want to watch my video? I can promise you that currently you are doing either of these things. You are saying, no, that's not true, I'm gonna make this in 3 months. Or you take your phone and you distract yourself, you escape it, or you simply agree with it, right? You start engaging with the conversation and now you say, maybe let's do 4 months. Maybe in 5 months it's possible, or maybe next year, right? Having set that new frame, that new image of your future self, now you are met with this old thought, and it is your job to become ignorant to any thought or emotion that opposes that future image, to simply observe it and maybe even smile at it and say, let's continue this workout. I have one frame from which I think and feel and behave, and that's me having that video with 100,000 views, or me having done 10K in that month. And anything that opposes it, we observe it and we become ignorant to it. We don't play the game anymore. We don't engage with it anymore. And I want to say this, it actually is the easiest thing you can do. Once you've made the decision that any thought or emotion that's part of that past self is just not something I engage with, it becomes also very simple. I don't have to react, right? There is no feeling as intense as that insecurity or doubt sometimes is. There is nothing that requires me to respond to it, because I already have my frame. I already have that future image, and I'll hold on to that. While those past thoughts and emotions, they can be there. To observe without response is how any fear, any suffering, any limiting belief will have no purpose anymore. And it has no other choice than to disappear. And it is exactly this way, by becoming stupidly ignorant to your past self. It is exactly in that way that we find this inner authority that says, I get to decide what comes next. That genuinely is, above all the skills and experiences and strategy that I've accumulated within my business, the most important thing that I needed to realize. I made this video about practical manifestation. If you want all the details, I strongly advise you watch it to execute on these steps. You will be blown away about how fast you can actually get new things in your life.